Welcome to the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today I'm delighted to be traveling to Kuala Lumpur to meet Azran Osman-Rani, who is the founder and CEO of a wonderful organization called Naluri. Hi, Azran. How are you? Great to see you again.
Hi, Chris. Good to reconnect.
Yeah, it's been a while, and lots happening in your space at the moment. You've got a great business, which I think really has an opportunity to serve people in these times. But maybe just a little start to give the listeners a bit of a background about you and your journey would be great, please.
Okay, well, in summary, over the last 15 years of my career, I've been building businesses that challenge the convention, the status quo, from an airline in a highly regulated, capital-intensive industry, from business plan to IPO in 6 years, iFlix, which is sort of the Netflix of emerging markets, again, from startup to 700 employees in 20 markets, and now taking on healthcare, chronic disease, and mental health. But the common pattern throughout all of this is, how do you look at existing models, products, services, and business models, and try to find a way of making it much more accessible and much more affordable for the mass market? And therefore, how do you also localize and contextualize it for the emerging markets, especially here in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, and mass market, obviously the space that we're in, there's plenty of people who are potentially your customers in that space. So, I think you're onto something great for the mass participation industry. We were talking before we came on air. You've had a fairly significant lockdown in Kuala Lumpur. You mentioned to me that you went out for your first run outside. Was it yesterday or today? This morning. So a good time. You've always got a smile on your face, but today is an even bigger smile that you've had some outdoor fresh air. But tell us a little bit about what life's been like in the last few weeks for you, please.
Well, the lockdown is pretty serious here. We've got military personnel supplementing the police officers to really make sure you don't go out beyond just your neighborhood supermarket. And even some people were arrested for trying to run within the compounds of their apartment complex, right? And so you're not even allowed to go out within the gated communities. So that means completely indoors, right? And that's difficult because pools are shut down, gyms are shut down. Luckily for me, I've got my turbo trainer, so I've got my bike, and that's been my primary workout. And we also now do a lot of classes, virtual workouts online, even virtual physiotherapy sessions with my physiotherapist, right? Just to make sure I continue to work on my joints and hip flexibility and all of that.
Gee, that's huge. On online physio, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And amazing that the modern technology, what we can do these days, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And you're a triathlete. You're an Ironman, and competed all over the world. Are you kind of getting that feeling of withdrawal at the moment? Was there a race that was on your calendar that's now been missed?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a 100+ cycling race in Langkawi in April, was canceled. Powerman, which is the duathlon in Malaysia in March, so that's been postponed, but I think that's going to be canceled as well. And of course, Ironman 70.3 in Desaru, which is a new location. We're very excited here in Malaysia to have our second Ironman race. It's in the southern part of Malaysia, right near Singapore, so that was supposed to be April 19th, and of course, that's now been postponed. So disappointing, but it's, to me, it's just a broader scale of a typical Ironman race. On an Ironman race, you can't expect everything to go according to plan. Things will always, there'll always be spanners in the works, and this is just one. It's just in a broader time frame.
Yeah, interesting. I was interviewing Andrew Messick, the global CEO of Ironman, a couple of weeks ago, and the analogy that he used is that he said, we as endurance athletes and people in this endurance industry, he believed were better qualified than many to be able to I guess, battle our way through COVID-19. And he was saying it's, the story he's been telling his staff, or the motivation is, imagine that you're running the marathon and you're halfway through and you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I guess the difference though is that we don't know where that finish line is, and that makes it mentally more challenging. In terms of that finish line, in terms of lockdown, do you have any indication yet of when that might start to be relaxed even further in Kuala Lumpur and Malaysia generally?
So the official date is the 12th of March. However, I think it will likely, some form of restrictions have to extend all the way to June because of the Hari Raya festival, right? And
Yeah.
this is a normal annual festival where people normally go and visit families and travel all around the country. And I think that's just extremely too risky. So I'm sure the government has got to put in place a lot of restrictions before the holidays at the end of May.
Yeah, right. Okay. So moving on from challenges of being, confined and so on, what are some of the challenges you're facing at the moment? You've got a business that you're building, you've got staff, I guess, all over Malaysia. You've got some international staff on your team as well, or they're mostly Malaysian based, and how are you interacting with and managing those challenges and any kind of other challenges that you might have?
Well, sure. I mean, first, we are now 100% remote, and including our team in Indonesia. But for a technology company, that's not difficult, right?
No.
Because inherently we're all online. The challenge, of course, is our work, where a lot of our work with helping people with diabetes and heart disease often takes place in a premise, whether it's in a corporate employment setting, an insurance office, or even hospitals, because we need to get people to take blood to establish a baseline, and then we coach them online to get them healthier in a quantifiable manner. And all those programs, even though we've got signed contracts, can't execute, right? Because of the lockdown. That being said, the focus now is a lot more on mental health.
Yeah.
So initially, the mental health angle was a way to provide support for people dealing with chronic diseases, but now organizations have reached out to us to provide mental health support for their employees, because the lockdown is causing elevated levels of depression, anxiety, and stress. So there is a little bit of a pivot, but it isn't enough, right? And so when revenues have shrunk, we've got to take difficult measures to cut costs. And what we've done is in order to avoid retrenching people and cutting jobs, for me and my co-founder, we've decided to forego salaries completely and ask our management team to take big cuts so that we don't have to ask our junior staff for pay cuts. Because for the junior staff, even a small cut is going to be very painful for them.
Yeah.
So we take the brunt of it and try to protect the junior guys, not just their jobs, but also their salaries.
Wow, that's amazing. And, again, it's a theme that I'm hearing more and more, is that, great companies looking after their staff, recognizing, the challenges that young people face. And, one of the other things that Andrew Messick was saying is, the young people in our businesses have never experienced the kind of adversity that many of us older people have been through. We've been through GFCs, we've been through 9/11s, we've been through all these sort of things. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And you must right now be in some ways thanking your lucky stars that you're not in the airline industry anymore. I mean, gee, the challenges there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting times there, isn't it? Wow. We won't go down that path right now. But in terms of, I mean, you've just spoken about leadership there. You've obviously shown great leadership in your business. How do you you've got people that you aspire to that have given you great leadership training techniques as you've grown up. I mean, you're undoubtedly a leader in many aspects of your community, but some little tips that you might want to pass on to this big mass participation industry, which is made up of small businesses all the way through to the Ironmans and the world marathon majors of this world?
Well, first, what I've learned is as entrepreneurs, we might have a tendency to try to solve everything ourselves, right? And that's just an unnecessary burden. And so the first thing is to be willing to ask for help and be willing to surround ourselves with positive people who help us reflect on our situation and think about different options, right? And that requires us to be more vulnerable and reach out for that. But secondly, I think also the process of doing that, right? Like it has to be very regular, i.e., and in my case, I need to set aside Friday afternoons for that reflective period, both with my teams to say, hey guys, what's been working this week? What hasn't been working? What are we going to try to do differently next week? And also then reaching out to my support structure, my executive coach, my peers, and use that point as reflection. Because the danger is if you don't put aside specific time, suddenly 3 to 4 weeks go through because we're busy trying to figure out how do I meet payroll for next month, and you're so focused on the immediate challenges, you forget to think about the bigger picture, right? Mm-hmm. So that has to be scheduled. And I think lastly, that also includes, even if it's 1 hour a week, to think about once this is over, how can the industry fundamentally change? And so I need to give myself bandwidth to think about that, right? Like from payment channels to technology to regulations, you have to start using that time to imagine. Because again, if you don't set aside that time, even if it's 1 hour a week, we're going to get so caught up in our tactical priorities that suddenly we miss out on things that are going to happen around the corner.
Well, some great tips, and so many people in survival mode at this stage, just focused on being on that rat wheel and not taking that time off. And I'm guessing, those Friday sessions with your team, there's a lot of focus on creating a safe environment for people to be able to share their challenges, and they're very different from you sitting around. And I remember when you spoke at Mass Participation World Conference in Singapore in December, this was one of the things you shared about getting together with your team and creating that. But how different is that now, creating that in a virtual environment, Azran?
Well, in a way it's similar, because the main thing is we just have to be very explicit about process. So one of the challenges with remote is it's very easy for, let's say, a discussion of 8 people to be dominated by only 2 or 3 people, right? Because people can kind of just hide quietly, right? And so as a leader, you've got to be very conscious of that and call people. You got to draw them into conversations.
Yeah.
Because if that doesn't happen, then suddenly they might be listening, but they may also just be doing other work, and that's not helpful, right? Because you don't see them physically.
Yeah.
So I think that's just one part, is just making sure that everyone is, and that includes, for example, saying, okay, we're going to spend 2 minutes each. Everyone, talk about this one issue. So you kind of go around to make sure everybody has a say. Then you reframe the point, and then kind of go through another round. But otherwise, only 2 or 3 people are going to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, well, that's a great tip. And you're a person who clearly has done so much personal development. You help people with personal development. Is there something that you've learnt during this time about yourself that surprised you, that kind of like, oh, wow?
Well, not so much me, because I really want to talk about other people, right? And I think very similar to people in the events business, people in the hotel and travel business are hit really, really hard. Right. And, one real source of inspiration for me was a friend of mine who runs a hotel in Langkawi. And I go there every year because, when we race Ironman Langkawi, that's my go-to place, for accommodation. Right. And so you can imagine all the bookings have collapsed. Right. There's zero revenue. And yet she's got costs. Right. She's got to maintain the facility, maintain staff and all of that. And it's common for people when they're in that situation to just think, oh, this is very difficult. You just focus on me. And the way she manages it, she decides, number one, the only way I may not be able to help myself, but let me channel my energy on helping someone else. And so she decided, you know what? Okay, we're going to just freeze everything. And by the way, she offered refunds for those of us who had bookings, right? Because I had this cycling race, and I didn't even ask for the booking, but the fact that she offered, I said, look, you know what? Keep it, because I'm definitely going to return. But she decided to spend her time galvanizing everyone, raising funds to buy milk and groceries for the underprivileged communities, the refugees, and that's how she had an outlet to channel her energy, rather than just kind of just sitting in the hotel and feeling blue, right? And so for me, that is inspiration. Like what I go through is nothing compared to someone who really is feeling, a zero revenue situation with staff and with fixed costs.
That's a wonderful story. It's similar, as you know, I live here in Bali, and I know one of the GMs here, his owners have said, we can't support you, and he's doing everything he can to make sure that hotel stays open, doing things with his staff, contributing to the community, and being innovative in terms of trying to bring forward revenue through and so on. So it's amazing the innovation that comes out of these periods of time, and the inspiration. Azran, always an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Many great nuggets that the viewers are going to be able to take away. So thank you so much for making the time. All the best with the continued success of Naluri, building something that I think is so valuable to community and the mass participation industry. And look forward to connecting again soon. And thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Cheers, Azran. Bye-bye.
Bye.